Hello, and a most sincere welcome to you as you join me for this evening's journey. I invite you to find that sanctuary of comfort, that quiet corner where the world outside can gently recede, allowing the whispers of the past to draw near. Tonight, we embark on an odyssey not across mere miles, but through the very heart of millennia, to explore a phenomenon that shaped civilizations, ignited imaginations, and wove the disparate threads of humanity into a more interconnected tapestry, the legendary Silk Road. This was never a singular, monolithic highway, but rather a vast, sprawling, ever-evolving network of arteries, dusty caravan tracks etched across formidable deserts, treacherous mountain passes conquered by sheer will, and even shimmering sea lanes that mirrored the celestial guides above. For more than 2,000 years, these intricate pathways served as the conduits through which the lifeblood of distant cultures pulsed, linking the imperial majesty of Han China with the classical grandeur of Rome, and all the vibrant civilizations that lay between and beyond. Conjure in your mind's eye the almost unimaginable scale, the rhythmic sway of Bactrian camels, their shaggy coats dusted with the ochre of the Taklamakan, their precious burdens wrapped and secured for a journey of months, even years. Envision the sensory kaleidoscope of an oasis caravan, Sarai at dusk, the flickering lamps illuminating faces from a dozen lands, the air thick with the aroma of exotic spices, roasting meat and animal musk, the murmur of countless languages, bartering, sharing news, forging fleeting yet vital connections in the shared experience of immense distance and common purpose. Through these veins flowed not only the coveted luminescence of silk, the piquant allure of spices from distant islands, and the weighty promise of gold and silver, but a cargo far more potent, far more transformative, philosophies that would challenge and reshape worldviews, religions that would offer solace and meaning to untold millions, technologies that would revolutionize agriculture, warfare, and communication, and inevitably the invisible, insidious travelers, diseases that could humble empires and redraw the maps of human settlement. The Silk Road is therefore more than a history of trade. It is a profound saga of human ambition against a backdrop of immense geographical challenge, a testament to insatiable curiosity about what lies beyond the horizon, and a powerful narrative of the enduring human instinct to connect, to exchange, to learn, and ultimately to understand one another across the divides of culture and creed. So, as the clamor of your day gently subsides and a welcome stillness descends, I encourage you, if you feel so inclined, to close your eyes, to allow your breath to find its own unhurried rhythm, and to let your imagination unfurl its sails, ready to navigate the deep currents of time back to an age of wonder, peril, and profound human interaction. Before we immerse ourselves fully in the currents of this ancient river of exchange, I would be truly delighted to connect with you, our cherished community of listeners, in the present moment. As you are settling into your evening, perhaps you might take a moment to share in the comments section below a little about how your day has transpired. Were there small victories, quiet moments of reflection, or perhaps challenges that tested your resolve? It is in sharing these human experiences that we often find common ground. And looking ahead, as you gaze towards the unfolding tapestry of your own future, what is one goal, one aspiration, be it a humble personal endeavor or a grander vision that you are currently cultivating in your thoughts or actions? Your insights and aspirations are always a source of inspiration and connection for us all. And it goes without saying, if these extensive voyages into the depths of history provide you with a source of calm, a moment of intellectual companionship, or a gentle passage into the realm of sleep, please do consider subscribing to our channel. Your viewership and support are the vital elements that enable us to continue researching, writing, and producing these narratives for you. We are profoundly grateful for each and every one of you who chooses to spend your valuable time with us. Now, with our modern reflections shared, let us cast our gaze far back to the earliest stirrings, the almost imperceptible tendrils of connection that predate even the name Silk Road. And explore the fertile ground from which this extraordinary network would eventually spring. The story of the Silk Road does not erupt into existence with a single dramatic event, nor was it conceived by a visionary architect drawing lines on a map. Its origins are far more ancient, more organic, like the slow geological processes that shape landscapes, a gradual accretion of countless small interactions, tentative explorations, and localized exchanges that, over millennia, began to coalesce into something larger. Even in the Neolithic and Bronze Ages, long before the Han dynasty looked westward, precious materials like lapis lazuli from the remote mines of Badakhshan in what is now Afghanistan were being traded over astonishing distances, finding their way to the royal tombs of Egypt and Mesopotamia. Jade, quarried in the Kunlun Mountains, was treasured in China for millennia, its early trade routes foreshadowing later pathways. The nomadic peoples of the Eurasian steppes, Scythians, Sarmatians, and others, were not merely raiders, but also facilitators of early long-distance contact, their mobile lifestyles and equestrian skills making them natural intermediaries, carrying goods and ideas across the vast grasslands that stretched from the Black Sea to the borders of China. Their art, characterized by stylized animal motifs, shows evidence of cultural exchange with both settled agricultural civilizations and other nomadic groups. A more formalized precursor can be seen in the Achaemenid Persian Empire, circa 550 BCE. The Achaemenids, masters of imperial administration, established the famed Royal Road, a marvel of ancient engineering and organization. This highway, stretching over 2,500 kilometers from Susa, one of the Persian capitals, to Sardis in western Anatolia, was equipped with regular posting stations, some 111 of them, according to Herodotus, fresh horses, and provisions for official couriers, allowing messages to traverse the empire in a matter of days. While primarily intended for administrative and military purposes, the Royal Road undoubtedly facilitated a degree of commerce and demonstrated on a grand scale the immense benefits of secure, well-maintained communication and transportation networks, setting a precedent for future imperial endeavors. The subsequent conquests of Alexander the Great of Macedon in the late 4th century BCE dramatically reshaped the political and cultural landscape of the Near East and Central Asia, though his vast empire fragmented soon after his death. Alexander's campaigns thrust Hellenistic culture, language, Koine Greek, art, and urban planning deep into Asia. His armies marched through Persia, Bactria, Sogdiana, and into the Indus Valley. He founded numerous cities, many named Alexandria, such as Alexandria Ishate, Alexandria the Furthest, in the Fergana Valley, and Alexandria Arakosiorum, modern Kandahar. These cities became outposts of Greek culture, garrison towns, and centers of Hellenistic influence that persisted for centuries under his successors, the Seleucids, and later in the Greco-Bactrian and Indo-Greek kingdoms. This Hellenistic legacy created a greater awareness in the Mediterranean world of the lands to the east and fostered a degree of cultural fusion as Greek artistic conventions and philosophical ideas began to interact with local traditions, particularly in regions like Bactria, modern northern Afghanistan, and southern Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, which became a vibrant melting pot. These early threads, the ancient trade in precious stones, the nomadic networks, the Persian infrastructure, and the Hellenistic cultural diffusion, all contributed to tilling the soil, creating a Eurasian world that, while still vast and fragmented, was becoming subtly more interconnected, setting the stage for the more systematic developments that would follow. The true genesis of what we recognize as the eastern segment of the Silk Road, and indeed the impetus that gave it its initial name, is inextricably linked to the strategic imperatives and expansive vision of the Han dynasty of China, particularly during the long and consequential reign of Emperor Wu Liuche, who ruled from 141 to 87 BCE. The Han Empire, having consolidated its power after the fall of the Qin dynasty, faced a formidable and persistent threat from the Xiongnu, a powerful confederation of nomadic tribes whose equestrian prowess and raiding tactics terrorized China's northern and northwestern frontiers. The Xiongnu were not a monolithic entity, but a fluid alliance of different groups, masters of steppe warfare, capable of striking deep into Han territory, disrupting agriculture, plundering resources, and challenging the very authority of the Son of Heaven. The Great Wall, segments of which had been built by earlier states and significantly expanded by the Qin, was a testament to this enduring struggle, a massive defensive undertaking, yet one that was often porous to determined Xiongnu incursions. Emperor Wu, a ruler of immense ambition, strategic acumen, and a perhaps ruthless determination, understood that a purely defensive strategy against the Xiongnu was ultimately a losing proposition. He sought to fundamentally alter the strategic balance by projecting Han power westward, by securing vital resources, and, crucially, by finding allies who could open a second front against the Xiongnu. It was within this grand strategic framework that he conceived of a daring diplomatic mission to the far west, to locate and forge an alliance with the Yuezhi people. The Yuezhi themselves, a nomadic group, had once been powerful neighbors of the Xiongnu in the Gansu corridor region, but had suffered a crushing defeat at their hands, which included the Xiongnu Chanyu, supreme leader, making a drinking cup from the skull of the Yuezhi king. This defeat had forced the Yuezhi to undertake a mass westward migration. Emperor Wu reasoned that the Yuezhi, nursing a deep-seated grievance against the Xiongnu, might be persuaded to return and join forces with the Han. In 138 BCE, Emperor Wu entrusted this monumental task to a court official named Zhang Qian, accompanied by a retinue of around 100 men, including a loyal Xiongnu guide and attendant named Ganfu, who had surrendered to the Han. Zhang Qian set out from the Han capital of Chang'an, modern Xi'an, into territories largely uncharted by the Chinese. Their journey was fraught with peril from the very outset. Scarcely had they passed beyond the Han-controlled Hexi corridor when they were intercepted and captured by the Xiongnu. Zhang Qian was brought before the Xiongnu Chanyu, who, rather than executing him, sought to integrate him into Xiongnu society, perhaps to gain intelligence, or simply out of a certain respect for his status as an imperial envoy. Zhang Qian was held captive for a decade. During this long period, he was given a Xiongnu wife, with whom he had children, and he learned much about Xiongnu customs, politics, and the geography of the steppes. He seemingly adapted to his new life, yet he never relinquished his imperial commission, the symbol of which, his ambassadorial staff or yak-tail banner, he reportedly kept with him throughout his captivity. Displaying extraordinary resilience and unwavering loyalty, Zhang Qian eventually seized an opportunity to escape. During a period of relative laxity in his surveillance, or perhaps amidst some internal Xiongnu turmoil, he, along with his Xiongnu wife and Ganfu, managed to slip away. Undeterred by his long captivity and the loss of most of his original party, he pressed on westward, determined to fulfill his mission. His journey now took him through some of the most inhospitable terrain on earth, across vast, sun-scorched deserts like the Gobi and the edges of the Taklamakan, and over formidable, snow-capped mountain ranges like the Tian Shan. He reached the kingdom of Dayuan, centered in the fertile Fergana Valley, in modern Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan. The people of Dayuan, who were settled agriculturalists with walled cities, were themselves under some pressure from the Xiongnu and were intrigued by the prospect of relations with the distant Han Empire. They were particularly renowned for their magnificent horses, large, strong, swift, and said to sweat blood, possibly due to a parasitic nematode, or simply a vivid description of their exertion. These were the famed heavenly horses, or celestial steeds, Tianma or Hangsuema, that would soon become an object of obsession for Emperor Wu and the Han military. Zhang Qian immediately recognized their immense strategic value, as they were far superior to the smaller, less robust Mongolian ponies then available to the Han cavalry, and could provide a crucial advantage against the Xiongnu horsemen. From Dayuan, whose rulers provided him with guides and provisions, Zhang Qian continued his quest for the Yuezhi. He journeyed further west and then south, passing through the territory of Kangju, a nomadic state in Sogdiana, and eventually located the main body of the Yuezhi, often referred to as the Great Yuezhi, settled in Transoxiana, north of the Oxus River, Amudarya. They had conquered the former Greco-Bactrian kingdom there and established a new prosperous domain. Zhang Qian presented Emperor Wu's proposal for an alliance. However, the Yuezhi, now secure and content in their fertile new lands and perhaps having lost their thirst for revenge after several generations or wary of provoking the Xiongnu anew, politely declined the offer. They had no desire to return eastward and re-engage in a costly war. Although Zhang Qian failed in his primary diplomatic objective, his mission was far from a bust. He spent over a year with the Yuezhi and in the surrounding regions, including a visit to Daxia, Bactria, south of the Oxus, which was then under Yuezhi suzerainty. In Daxia, he made a curious and significant observation. He saw bamboo canes and cloth that he recognized as products of Shu, modern Sichuan province in southwestern China. Upon inquiry, he was told that these goods had come from Chengdu, India, and had been brought to Daxia by merchants, suggesting the existence of an indirect southern trade route linking southwestern China with India, and then onward to Central Asia, a route that bypassed the Xiongnu-controlled northern territories. This information was of immense interest to Emperor Wu. Zhang Qian meticulously gathered a wealth of intelligence about the geography, peoples, cultures, products, military strength, and political situations of the various kingdoms and regions. He visited Dayuan, Kangju, the Yuezhi, Daxia, Anxi, the Parthian Empire further west, Tiaoji, Mesopotamia or Chaldea, and Chengdu. After about a year in the lands of the Yuezhi and Daxia, Zhang Qian began his long and perilous return journey to China. Unfortunately, he was once again captured by the Xiongnu in the Qilian Mountains region and held for another year. He managed to escape a second time during the chaos following the death of the Xiongnu Chanyu. Finally, in 125 BCE, after an absence of 13 years, Zhang Qian, accompanied only by his Xiongnu wife and his faithful attendant Ganfu, returned to the Han capital of Chang'an. Of the original 100-plus men who had set out, only these two survived the epic odyssey. Zhang Qian's return caused a sensation at the Han court. Though he had failed to secure the Yuezhi alliance, the detailed reports he provided of sophisticated urban civilizations in the western regions, Xiyu, of kingdoms previously unknown to the Chinese, of the potential for trade, of existing commercial networks, and, most tantalizingly, of those magnificent Fergana horses, electrified Emperor Wu and his officials. Zhang Qian was hailed as a hero showered with honors and titles, including Grand Messenger, or Marquis of Boang, and his accounts became the cornerstone of Han China's subsequent westward policy. His journey effectively opened up the West to Chinese eyes, dispelling myths and providing concrete knowledge that would fuel decades of exploration, military expeditions and commercial ventures. The quest for the heavenly horses of Dayuan became a paramount concern for Emperor Wu, who saw them as essential for building a cavalry force capable of decisively defeating the Xiongnu. Several diplomatic missions were sent to Dayuan to procure these horses, offering gold and silk in exchange. When these efforts met with limited success, and after a Han envoy was killed, Emperor Wu, in a fit of rage, launched two major military expeditions against Dayuan. The first, in 104 BCE, was a disastrous failure. The second, a much larger and better organized force led by General Li Guangli in 102-101 BCE, after a grueling siege of the Dayuan capital, eventually succeeded in forcing the kingdom to provide a substantial number of prime breeding horses. These military campaigns, though incredibly costly in terms of lives and resources, served to project Han power deep into Central Asia, intimidate other oasis city-states in the Tarim Basin, and secure the routes leading to Fergana. To consolidate these gains and protect the burgeoning trade and communication lines, the Han dynasty embarked on a significant program of frontier expansion and fortification. The Great Wall was extended westward, far into the Gansu corridor, with a series of watchtowers, forts, and supply depots. Agricultural colonies, Tuntian, were established, settled by soldiers and convicts, to make the frontier regions more self-sufficient. In food, the strategically vital oasis town of Dunhuang, situated at the western end of the Gansu corridor, where the routes diverged to skirt the northern and southern edges of the Taklamakan Desert, was heavily fortified and became a crucial administrative center, military outpost, and commercial gateway, the throat of the Silk Road's eastern terminus. From Dunhuang, caravans would venture into the vast and perilous Taklamakan, relying on a string of fragile oasis city-states like Lulan, Miran, Khotan, Yarkand, and Kashgar on the southern route, or Turfan, Kucha, and Aksu on the northern route, for water, supplies, and trade. These oases, fed by meltwater from the towering Kunlun, Pamir, and Tian Shan mountains, were literal lifelines in a sea of sand. Slowly, painstakingly, under the impetus of strategic necessity and the lure of exotic goods, the pathways began to solidify. Chinese silk, a state-controlled monopoly for centuries, its production techniques, sericulture, the cultivation of mulberry trees, the rearing of Bombyx mori silkworms, the reeling of the fine filament from their cocoons, and the weaving of the lustrous fabric, a closely guarded secret, became the primary commodity that China offered to the nascent Western markets. Silk was not just beautiful and luxurious. It was lightweight, strong, versatile, warm in winter, cool in summer, and could be dyed in brilliant colors. Within China, it was used for imperial robes, as rewards for officials, as diplomatic gifts to vassal states and nomadic leaders, a way of buying peace or allegiance, and even as a form of currency. As Han influence pushed westward, silk began to flow out in greater quantities, initially often as official gifts or subsidies, but increasingly as a trade good carried by a chain of intrepid intermediaries. Besides silk, the Han also exported iron tools and weapons. Chinese iron and steel technology was advanced for its time, fine lacquerware, bronze mirrors, and perhaps rhubarb, valued for its medicinal properties. In return, they sought not only horses, but also jade from Khotan, furs, woolen textiles, and eventually other exotic goods from further west. This foundational period, driven by Zhang Qian's pioneering explorations and Emperor Wu's expansionist policies, effectively opened the eastern sections of what would become the Silk Road. It established the initial infrastructure, forged the political will, and created the demand that would draw goods and peoples across the vast distances of Central Asia. It was a process born of conflict and strategic calculation, but one that would inadvertently unleash a torrent of commercial and cultural exchange that would reshape the ancient world. The seeds had been sown, and the caravan routes, though still perilous and rudimentary, were beginning to carry the first precious loads between east and west. The complex mechanism by which goods traversed the vast distances of Eurasia in these early centuries was rarely, if ever, a direct point-to-point journey undertaken by a single merchant or caravan from China to Rome, or vice versa. Instead, the Silk Road operated as an intricate relay system, a chain of interconnected regional trade networks. Goods would change hands multiple times, passing from one group of merchants to another, their value typically increasing with each transaction as they moved further from their source and as various intermediaries added their costs and profits. A Chinese merchant might transport silk from Chang'an or Luoyang to Dunhuang, or even further west into the Tarim Basin, perhaps as far as Kashgar or Khotan. There, the silk might be purchased by Sogdian, Bactrian, or other Central Asian traders who would then undertake the arduous journey across the Pamir Mountains or through the Fergana Valley into the territories of western Central Asia. The Parthian Empire, circa 247 BCE, 224 CE, centered in Persia, modern Iran and Iraq, played a pivotal role as a dominant intermediary in this westward flow. Having supplanted the Seleucid Empire in the region, the Parthians, a semi-nomadic people of Iranian stock, established a large and powerful state that controlled the crucial overland routes leading from Central Asia towards Mesopotamia, Syria, and the eastern frontiers of the Roman Empire. They quickly recognized the immense economic potential of the burgeoning trade in silk and other Eastern luxuries and positioned themselves as the primary controllers and beneficiaries of this commerce within their vast territory. Parthian cities, like Ctesiphon, their capital on the Tigris, Ecbatana, and Hecatompylos, became important trading centers. The Parthians levied taxes and customs duties on goods passing through their lands, generating significant revenue for their state. Their relationship with the ever-expanding Roman Empire to their west was often characterized by intense political rivalry and frequent military conflicts, particularly over control of the buffer states of Armenia and the borderlands of Mesopotamia. This political antagonism sometimes spilled over into trade relations, with the Parthians jealously guarding their lucrative role as middlemen, generally preventing direct diplomatic or commercial contact between the Roman and Chinese empires. They were content to buy silk from Central Asian traders and sell it at a considerable markup to Roman merchants at frontier emporia like Dura Europos on the Euphrates, or through ports in the Persian Gulf that connected via sea routes to Romanum, Egypt, and the Red Sea. Meanwhile, in the burgeoning cities of the Roman Empire, Rome itself, with its insatiable appetite for the exotic, as well as major provincial centers like Alexandria in Egypt, Antioch in Syria, and Palmyra, a semi-independent oasis city that flourished as a caravan hub, the arrival of this mysterious, shimmering fabric from the distant, almost mythical land of Ceres, the Roman name for China or the silk-producing country, caused a sensation. Wealthy Romans, from senators and their wives to newly rich equestrians, were instantly captivated by silk. Its softness, its lightness, its ability to take vibrant dyes, and its sheer exoticism made it the ultimate symbol of luxury, status, and sensual indulgence. Roman poets like Virgil, Horace, and Ovid made passing references to the seers and their silken products, though their understanding of the geography and the production process was typically vague and often fantastical. Some believed silk was combed from the leaves of special trees, others that it was the product of giant insects. The Parthians, naturally, did little to dispel these myths, as it helped maintain the mystique and high price of the commodity. The demand for silk in Rome became so immense that it provoked a strong backlash from conservative moralists and economic commentators. Figures like Seneca the Younger, a Stoic philosopher and tutor to Emperor Nero, famously decried the sheerness of silk garments worn by women, lamenting in his De Beneficiis that they served not to cover the body but to show it, and that a flimsy texture makes a woman's husband no more acquainted than any outsider or foreigner with his wife's body. Pliny the Elder, in his encyclopedic Natural History, written in the 1st century CE, complained vociferously about the economic consequences of this luxury trade. He estimated that the Roman Empire lost at least 100 million sesterces annually to India, China, Sears, and the Arabian Peninsula to pay for goods like silk, spices, pearls, and perfumes. He famously wrote, "So dearly do we pay for our luxury and our women," highlighting the significant drain of Roman gold and silver coinage eastward to satisfy this craving for Eastern exotica. Despite these moral condemnations and economic concerns, the allure of silk proved irresistible, and its consumption continued to grow, becoming a defining feature of Roman aristocratic life and a major driver of the Silk Road trade. While silk was undoubtedly the star attraction flowing westward, it was by no means the only commodity. Spices from India and Southeast Asia, the Spice Islands or Moluccas, were almost equally prized. Pepper from the Malabar coast of India was a staple luxury used extensively in Roman cuisine and medicine. Cloves, nutmeg, and mace from the Moluccas, cinnamon from Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia, and ginger from India and China also made their way west, their potent aromas and flavors commanding high prices. Precious stones were another important category. Deep blue lapis lazuli from the Badakhshan region of Afghanistan was highly valued for jewelry and as a pigment, ultramarine. Rubies and sapphires came from India and Sri Lanka. Emeralds were sourced from Egypt and perhaps India. Carnelian and agate came from various parts of India and Persia, and pearls were harvested from the Persian Gulf and the waters around Sri Lanka and southern India. Ivory, sourced from both African elephants via Red Sea ports and Indian elephants, was intricately carved into statuettes, furniture inlays, and other decorative objects. Other goods moving westward included cotton textiles from India, muslins and calicos, fragrant woods like sandalwood, medicinal herbs such as nard and costus root, and even exotic animals like parrots, peacocks, and occasionally tigers or rhinoceroses for Roman arenas and menageries. In the eastward direction, the flow of goods was perhaps less voluminous in terms of value, but still significant. Roman glassware, renowned for its clarity, artistry, and variety of techniques, including mold-blowing millefiori and cameo glass, was highly esteemed in the East and has been found in archaeological sites as far afield as China, Korea, and Japan, often in elite burials. High-quality woolen textiles from Roman Gaul and Syria, linen from Egypt, and asbestos cloth, which fascinated the Chinese with its fire-resistant properties, were also exported. Roman wine transported in amphorae, and olive oil found markets in the East, though likely more in Persia and India than as far as China. Gold and silver coinage, particularly Roman denarii and aurae, became a widely accepted medium of exchange along many parts of the Silk Road, and were often melted down and restruck by local rulers or used as bullion. Other Roman exports included coral from the Mediterranean, valued in India for its supposed magical properties, amber from the Baltic region, which traveled south via river routes to connect with the Silk Road, and some manufactured metal goods such as bronze lamps and tripods. It is also suggested that Roman engineering skills and artistic motifs may have had some influence, albeit difficult to trace directly, in the East. This complex multi-stage relay system, involving a diverse array of merchants, cultures, and empires, characterized the early operations of the Silk Road. It was a testament to the power of market forces, human ingenuity, and the enduring desire for connection, even in a world where vast distances, formidable geographical barriers, and political rivalries posed constant challenges. The foundations laid by the Han Dynasty's westward push and the Roman world's insatiable demand for Eastern luxuries had set in motion a dynamic process of exchange that would only grow in complexity and significance in the centuries to come, transforming not just economies, but also cultures, religions, and the very understanding different civilizations had of each other. As the early centuries of the Common Era unfolded, the Kushan Empire emerged as a dominant and pivotal force in the heartland of the Silk Road, acting as a crucial bridge between East and West, North and South. The Kushans were originally one of the 5 tribes of the Yuezhi Confederation, the same Yuezhi whom Zhang Qian had sought out. After being driven from the Gansu corridor by the Xiongnu, the Yuezhi had migrated westward, eventually settling in Bactria and Sogdiana. By the 1st century CE, the Kushan tribe, under leaders like Kujula Kadphises, had gained ascendancy over the other Yuezhi groups and began to forge a vast empire. At its zenith, particularly during the reign of Kanishka War, traditionally dated to the 2nd century CE, though his exact dates are still debated, the Kushan Empire stretched from parts of modern-day Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Afghanistan in the west, across northwestern Pakistan, including the ancient region of Gandhara, and deep into northern India, with important centers like Mathura under their control. Their winter capital was often at Purushapura, modern Peshawar, Pakistan, and their summer capital at Begram, ancient Kapisa, near modern Kabul, Afghanistan, a site which has yielded spectacular hoards of trade goods including Roman glassware, Chinese lacquerware, and Indian ivories. Attesting to its role as a major commercial hub, the Kushan's strategic location was unparalleled. They controlled the key mountain passes of the Hindu Kush, Karakoram, and Pamir ranges, the formidable natural barriers that separated the Indian subcontinent from Central Asia and China. This gave them a commanding position over the major arteries of the Silk Road. They became indispensable intermediaries, facilitating and profiting from the flow of goods between the Roman Empire and later its Byzantine successor in the West. The Han Dynasty and its successors in China to the east, the various kingdoms of India to the south, and the nomadic peoples of the steppes to the north. The Kushans understood the value of this trade and actively fostered it, providing a degree of security and stability along the routes within their domain, and issuing a sophisticated coinage that blended Hellenistic, Indian, and Iranian traditions, which facilitated commerce. Their coins, often in gold and copper, featured portraits of Kushan rulers on the obverse, and a diverse pantheon of deities on the reverse, including Greek, Helios, Selene, Iranian, Mithra, Ahura Mazda, Hindu, Shiva, Skanda, and Buddhist figures, reflecting the empire's multicultural and religiously tolerant character. These coins have been found far and wide, from Scandinavia to Ethiopia and China, underscoring the vast reach of Kushan commercial connections. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of the Kushan Empire lies in its remarkable cultural syncretism and its profound role in the patronage and dissemination of Mahayana Buddhism. The region of Gandhara, which formed a core part of the Kushan realm, had been exposed to Hellenistic influences since the time of Alexander the Great and the subsequent Greco-Bactrian kingdoms. Under Kushan rule, Gandhara became a flourishing center of Buddhist art and learning. It was here that some of the earliest and most iconic anthropomorphic representations of the Buddha and Bodhisattvas were created. These Gandharan sculptures, often carved from gray schist, beautifully illustrate the fusion of Indian Buddhist themes with Greco-Roman artistic conventions. The Buddha is often depicted with wavy Apollo-like hair, a top-knot ushnisha resembling a classical chignon, toga-like robes the Buddhist Sanghati rendered with realistic drapery, serene facial features, and sometimes even accompanied by figures like Heracles, acting as a protector, Vajrapani. This artistic style, which humanized the Buddha and made Buddhist imagery more accessible, played a crucial role in the religion's appeal and its spread along the Silk Road. Kushan rulers, particularly Kanishka, are renowned as great patrons of Buddhism. Kanishka is traditionally credited with convening the Fourth Buddhist Council, though its location and exact nature are debated, with some traditions placing it in Kashmir or Jalandhar, which is considered a pivotal event in the history of Mahayana Buddhism. Mahayana, with its emphasis on the bodhisattva ideal, enlightened beings who delay their own nirvana to help others, its more expansive cosmology and its devotional practices found fertile ground within the Kushan Empire and among the diverse merchant communities traversing the Silk Road. Under Kushan patronage, numerous monasteries, viharas, and stupas were built and endowed throughout their empire. These monastic centers, such as those in Taxila, Pushkalavati, Bamiyan, though the giant Buddhas there likely date to a slightly later period, they reflect this Gandharan tradition, and Surk Kotal, a major dynastic shrine in Afghanistan, became not only religious and spiritual hubs, but also centers of learning, art production, and repositories of scriptures. They also served as vital nodes in the Silk Road network, offering hospitality, medical care, and safe havens for travelers, including merchants and pilgrims. The Kushans also facilitated the transmission of Buddhist texts and ideas into Central Asia and China. Monks and scholars from India and Gandhara traveled eastward, carrying scriptures and teachings, while Chinese pilgrims began to venture westward in search of authentic Buddhist knowledge. The Kushan language itself, Bactrian, or an Eastern Iranian language written in a modified Greek script, became an important medium for Buddhist texts in Central Asia for a time. The empire's stability and its cosmopolitan nature created an environment where different cultures and ideas could meet, mingle, and transform, making the Kushan era a particularly vibrant and dynamic period in the history of the Silk Road. Their control over the crossroads of Asia ensured that they were not just passive observers, but active shapers of the transcontinental exchange that defined their age. The wealth generated from this trade undoubtedly contributed to the flourishing of art, architecture, and religious institutions within the Kushan realm, leaving a rich archaeological and cultural legacy that continues to fascinate scholars today. Further to the west of the Kushan domain, the Parthian Empire, which had long served as a crucial intermediary in the Silk Road trade, eventually gave way to a new Persian dynasty, the Sasanians, in 224 CE. Ardashir I, a local ruler from Persis, Fars province in modern Iran, overthrew the last Parthian king, Artabanus IV, and established the Sasanian Empire, which would endure for over 4 centuries until its conquest by the Arab Muslims in the mid-7th century. The Sasanians, claiming descent from the Achaemenid Persians of old, sought to revive Persian glory and presented themselves as successors to that illustrious imperial tradition. They established a highly centralized state, with Zoroastrianism as the dominant state religion, though other faiths like Christianity, Judaism, and Manichaeism were also present and sometimes tolerated, sometimes persecuted, depending on the political climate. Like their Parthian predecessors, the Sasanians controlled the vital western land routes of the Silk Road, those that led from Central Asia and the Iranian plateau towards Mesopotamia, Syria, Armenia, and the Au, frontiers of the Roman Empire and its eastern successor, the Byzantine Empire. Their relationship with Rome, Byzantium, was one of persistent rivalry and frequent, often devastating warfare, punctuated by periods of uneasy peace and diplomatic exchange. These conflicts often fought over control of border territories like Armenia, Mesopotamia, and the Caucasus inevitably impacted the flow of trade. During times of war, routes could be disrupted, merchants harassed, and goods interdicted. However, the economic benefits of the Silk Road trade were too significant for either empire to ignore completely. So even during hostilities, some level of commerce often continued, perhaps through neutral intermediaries or along less direct routes. The Sasanians were not merely facilitators of transit trade. They were also highly skilled artisans and producers of their own luxury goods, which entered the Silk Road network and were prized both in the West and the East. Sasanian metalwork, particularly elaborately decorated silver plates, bowls, and ewers featuring royal hunting scenes, investiture scenes, or mythological creatures, like the Sen Merv, a griffin-like bird, executed with remarkable skill in techniques like repoussé, chasing, and gilding, are considered masterpieces of Persian art. Sasanian textiles, including rich silks, brocades, and tapestries, often adorned with characteristic Sasanian motifs such as paired animals in rondelles, winged horses, and royals. Portraits were highly sought after and influenced textile design in Byzantium, Central Asia, and even China and Japan. Fragments of Sasanian textiles have been found in Dunhuang and in the Shoso Imperial Repository in Nara, Japan. Sasanian glassware, often featuring cut or applied decoration, also achieved a high level of artistry and was traded widely. These Sasanian products competed with, and sometimes complemented, goods arriving from further east, adding another layer of complexity to the Silk Road trade. The Sasanians, like the Parthians before them, were keen to maintain their profitable position as middlemen for Chinese silk destined for the Roman Byzantine market. They generally sought to prevent direct contact between the Mediterranean world and China, preferring to buy raw silk or finished silk goods from Central Asian traders, primarily Sogdians, and then sell them at a substantial profit to Byzantine merchants at designated frontier posts or through Arab intermediaries in places like Hira, a Lakhmid Arab client kingdom of the Sasanians. This Sasanian control over the primary silk routes was a constant source of frustration for the Byzantine Empire, which was a massive consumer of silk for imperial regalia, aristocratic dress, and increasingly for the rich vestments and altar cloths of the Christian Church. Byzantine emperors periodically attempted to find alternative routes to access silk and other Eastern goods, thereby bypassing Sasanian territory and breaking their monopoly. One such attempt was made during the reign of Emperor Justinian I, 527-565 CE. He tried to encourage trade via sea routes, particularly through Aksumite Ethiopia and the Red Sea, hoping to access Indian and Chinese goods directly. He also explored northern land routes through the Caucasus region, across the Black Sea, and via the steppes of southern Russia, aiming to connect with Central Asian traders beyond Sasanian control. These alternative routes, however, often proved more difficult, more dangerous, or less reliable than the traditional Sasanian-controlled pathways. It was also during Justinian's reign, according to the Byzantine historian Procopius of Caesarea, that the secret of sericulture, silk production, was finally smuggled out of the East and into the Byzantine Empire. The traditional story, likely embellished but perhaps containing a kernel of truth, tells of two Nestorian Christian monks, or possibly merchants disguised as monks, who had traveled to Serinda, a land often identified with Khotan or another silk-producing region in Central Asia, or perhaps even China itself. They observed the complex process of silkworm cultivation and silk reeling, and around 552 CE, managed to smuggle silkworm eggs and mulberry tree seeds back to Constantinople, hidden within their hollow bamboo walking staffs. Justinian, delighted, is said to have established a state-controlled silk industry in Byzantium, primarily in Syria and Greece. While it took time to develop, this Byzantine silk production eventually reduced, though never entirely eliminated, the empire's dependence on imported Eastern silk and broke the long-standing Persian and Chinese monopoly. However, Chinese silk, particularly the highest quality varieties, often continued to be prized for its superior craftsmanship and unique patterns. The introduction of sericulture to the West was a major technological transfer facilitated by the Silk Road, albeit through clandestine means, and it had significant long-term economic and cultural consequences for Byzantium and later for other parts of Europe. The Sasanian era, therefore, was a critical period for the Silk Road. Despite the ongoing political tensions and military conflicts with Rome-Byzantium, the empire served as a vital conduit and a significant contributor to the transcontinental exchange. Sasanian cities like Ctesiphon, Gundashapur, famous for its academy and hospital, which drew scholars from various traditions, and Nishapur were vibrant centers of culture, learning, and commerce, where goods and ideas from east and west converged, were transformed, and then disseminated further. The Sasanians left an indelible mark on Persian art, architecture, and imperial ideology, and their influence extended far along the Silk Road, shaping cultural developments in Central Asia and even reaching the Far East. The tapestry of the Silk Road was not just woven with threads of silk and gold, but also, and perhaps more profoundly, with the vibrant and often competing strands of religious and philosophical ideas. This era, spanning from the early centuries CE through the Tang and early Islamic periods, witnessed an extraordinary fluorescence and diffusion of faiths across the Eurasian landmass, a spiritual commerce that often paralleled and was facilitated by the movement of material goods. Buddhism, which had originated in India in the 6th-5th centuries BCE, continued its remarkable eastward and northward expansion, becoming one of the most significant cultural forces transmitted along the Silk Road. While Theravada Buddhism became dominant in Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia, it was primarily Mahayana Buddhism that found fertile ground along the caravan routes, leading into Central Asia, China, and eventually Korea and Japan. Mahayana, with its expansive cosmology, its emphasis on the bodhisattva ideal, compassionate beings who postpone their own enlightenment to assist all sentient beings, its development of a rich pantheon of Buddhas and bodhisattvas like Amitabha, Avalokiteshvara, Manjushri, and Maitreya, and its more devotional and lay-oriented practices resonated deeply with diverse populations, including the merchant communities who were so crucial to the Silk Road. These merchants, often pious Buddhists, not only carried goods but also acted as patrons of the faith, endowing monasteries, commissioning artworks, and supporting monks and scholars. Monasteries, viharas, and cave temple complexes became defining features of the Buddhist Silk Road. Strategically located in or near oasis towns, these establishments served multiple functions. They were, of course, centers of religious worship, meditation, and learning. They housed communities of monks and nuns who studied scriptures, practiced rituals, and provided spiritual guidance. Many monasteries possessed extensive libraries of Buddhist texts, sutras, Vinaya, and Abhidharma, and became centers for the translation of these scriptures from Sanskrit, Pali, or various Prakrits into local languages like Sogdian, Khotanese, Tocharian, Tibetan, and most importantly, Chinese. Beyond their religious role, these monasteries were vital nodes in the Silk Road infrastructure. They often provided lodging, food, and medical care for traveling merchants and pilgrims, irrespective of their faith. They could act as safe depositaries for valuable goods and even as rudimentary banks, facilitating commercial transactions. They owned land, engaged in agriculture, and sometimes even participated in trade themselves, accumulating considerable wealth and influence. The Great Cave, temple complexes such as the Mogao Caves at Dunhuang, the Kizel Caves near Kucha, the Bezeklik Thousand Buddha caves near Turfan in the Tarim Basin, and the now tragically destroyed colossal Buddhas of Bamiyan in Afghanistan stand as breathtaking testaments to the flourishing Buddhist culture along these routes. Carved into cliff faces over centuries, these sites contain thousands of man-made caves, adorned with vibrant murals and sculptures. The murals at Dunhuang, for instance, offer a visual encyclopedia of Mahayana Buddhist beliefs and practices. Jataka tales, stories of the Buddha's previous lives, scenes from the life of Shakyamuni Buddha, majestic depictions of various Buddhas and their pure lands, paradises like Amitabha's Sukhavati, portraits of powerful bodhisattvas, mandalas, and images of monastic life. They also provide invaluable glimpses into the secular world of the Silk Road, portraits of donors, merchants, officials, royalty, commoners, often identified by inscriptions, scenes of agriculture, commerce, warfare, music, and dance, and depictions of the diverse ethnic groups who traversed these lands. The artistic styles in these cave temples show a fascinating amalgamation of influences: Indian, Gupta, and Gandharan, Persian, Sasanian, Greco-Roman, Hellenistic, and indigenous Central Asian and Chinese traditions, creating unique regional schools of art. Pilgrims played an indispensable role in this religious and intellectual exchange. Devout Chinese Buddhist monks, seeking authentic teachings and authoritative scriptures, undertook extraordinarily arduous and dangerous journeys to India, the holy land of Buddhism. We have already mentioned Faxian, who traveled in the early Huai's 5th century. His record of Buddhist kingdoms, Foguoji, is a precious historical document. Even more famous was Xuanzang, circa 602-664 CE, a Tang dynasty monk who, concerned about inconsistencies and gaps in the Buddhist texts available in China, embarked on an epic 17-year pilgrimage, 629-645 CE, to India. He traveled overland, defying an imperial ban on travel to the west, crossing the Gobi Desert, the Tian Shan Mountains, passing through oasis kingdoms like Turfan and Kucha, traversing the treacherous Pamirs and Hindu Kush, and visiting major Buddhist centers in Gandhara, Kashmir, and across northern and central India. He spent several years studying Yogacara philosophy at the great monastic university of Nalanda in Bihar. He returned to China, again largely overland, laden with some 657 Buddhist texts, relics, and statues. Emperor Taizong of Tang, who had initially opposed his journey, welcomed him back as a hero. Xuanzang then devoted the rest of his life, with imperial patronage and a large team of scholar monks, to translating these scriptures into Chinese, a monumental undertaking that profoundly shaped the development of East Asian Buddhism. His detailed travelogue, the Great Tang Records on the Western Regions, Da Teng Sut Ji, provides an unparalleled first-hand account of the geography, peoples, cultures, political conditions, and Buddhist practices of Central and South Asia in the 7th century. It remains an invaluable source for historians and archaeologists, and later inspired the beloved Chinese epic novel Journey to the West, Xiu Ji, featuring the Monkey King Sun Wukong as Xuanzang's protector. Other important Chinese pilgrims included Yujing, 635-713 CE, who, unlike Faxian and Xuanzang, traveled to India primarily by sea via Srivijaya in Sumatra, and also brought back many texts and wrote important accounts of Buddhist practices in India and Southeast Asia. These pilgrims were not just devout individuals. They were intrepid explorers, scholars, linguists, and cultural ambassadors who forged vital intellectual links across Asia. While Buddhism was perhaps the most widespread religion spreading eastward, Nestorian Christianity also carved out a significant presence along the Silk Road. Officially known as the Church of the East, its theological distinctiveness, emphasizing the two Distinct natures, human and divine, of Jesus Christ, a view condemned at the Council of Ephesus in 431 CE and the Council of Chalcedon in 451 CE by the Western and Byzantine churches, led to its separation from the mainstream Christian world of the Roman Empire. Finding refuge and tolerance within the Sasanian Persian Empire, which was often hostile to Roman-aligned Christianity, the Church of the East flourished and established a vibrant intellectual and missionary tradition. Its Catholicos patriarch resided in Seleucia Ctesiphon, the Sasanian capital. From Persia, Nestorian missionaries, many of whom were merchants or traveled with merchant caravans, carried their faith eastward along the Silk Road. They were remarkably successful in establishing dioceses and communities throughout Central Asia, in major trading centers like Merv, Samarkand, Bukhara, Herat, Kashgar, and Turfan, and eventually reached China itself during the Tang Dynasty. The famous Qian Stele, Daqin Jingjiao Luxing Zhongguo Bei, a large stone monument erected in the Tang capital of Chang'an in 781 CE, inscribed in both Chinese and Syriac, the liturgical language of the Church of the East, documents the arrival of Nestorian missionaries, led by a figure named Alopan in 635 CE, the favorable reception they received from Emperor Taizong, and the subsequent history and doctrines of the luminous religion, Jingjiao, as Nestorianism was known in China for over 150 years. Archaeological evidence, including Nestorian crosses, manuscripts, and church ruins, has been found across Central Asia and in China, attesting to their widespread presence. They translated parts of the Bible and liturgical texts into local languages like Sogdian and Uyghur. Manichaeism, another religion of Persian origin, also spread extensively along the Silk Road. Founded by the prophet Mani, circa 216-276 CE, in Sasanian Mesopotamia, Manichaeism was a highly syncretic Gnostic religion that sought to combine elements of Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, Christianity, and Mesopotamian religious traditions into a universal faith. Mani proclaimed himself the Apostle of Light and the final prophet that a line that included Zoroaster, Buddha, and Jesus. He taught a radical dualism, positing an eternal struggle between a transcendent God of light, good, and a demonic king of darkness, evil. The human soul was a particle of light trapped in the material world of darkness, and salvation lay in gnosis, knowledge, and strict ascetic practices designed to liberate the light. Manichaeism was highly organized with a hierarchy of elect, ascetic leaders, and hearers, lay followers, a rich corpus of sacred scriptures, many written by Mani himself, and a strong emphasis on missionary activity. Its teachings, often accompanied by beautiful illuminated manuscripts and art, proved appealing to diverse audiences, particularly among merchant communities. Sogdian traders were instrumental in its eastward diffusion. For a period in the 8th Malostykirstachbetes and 9th centuries, Manichaeism became the state religion of the powerful Uyghur Khaganate, which controlled a significant portion of the eastern Silk Road from their capital in the Orkhon Valley, Mongolia, and later in Kocho, Turfan Basin. This royal patronage greatly facilitated its spread and prestige. Manichaean monasteries, temples, and communities could be found from Persia and Mesopotamia across Central Asia and into China, where it was known as Mingjiao, religion of light. Though often persecuted by Zoroastrian, Christian, and later Islamic authorities, Manichaeism survived for over a millennium, leaving a rich legacy of texts, many discovered at Dunhuang and Turfan, and artistic traditions. Zoroastrianism, the Aichut, ancient religion of Persia, founded by the prophet Zoroaster, Zarathustra, possibly as early as the 2nd millennium BCE, also traveled with Persian merchants and settlers, though it was generally less missionary in its outreach compared to Buddhism, Christianity, or Manichaeism. As the state religion of the Achaemenid, Parthian, and Sasanian empires, It had a profound influence on Persian culture and identity. Its core tenets included ethical dualism, the struggle between Ahura Mazda, the wise lord, and Angra Mainyu, the destructive spirit, the importance of free will, an emphasis on truth, charity, and ritual purity, and beliefs in an afterlife, resurrection, and a final judgment. Fire, as a symbol of Ahura Mazda's purity and light, played a central role in Zoroastrian worship, with sacred fires maintained in fire temples, ateshgas. Zoroastrian communities and fire temples existed in various Silk Road trading centers, in Central Asia and even in parts of China, particularly where there were Sasanian or Sogdian merchant enclaves. After the Islamic conquest of Persia, Zoroastrianism gradually declined, though it survived in pockets in Iran and among the Parsi community in India, who fled Persia to preserve their faith. Jewish merchant communities also had a long and continuous presence along many segments of the Silk Road. Jewish traders, sometimes referred to as Ratanites in certain medieval Arab texts, were involved in long-distance commerce between Europe, the Middle East, India, and China. Archaeological evidence, such as Judeo-Persian documents found in Afghanistan and business letters from the Cairo Geniza, as well as inscriptions and references in Chinese sources to Jewish communities, e.g. in Kaifeng, attest to their activity across Eurasia over many centuries. They traded in a wide variety of goods and often formed close-knit diasporic communities that maintained religious and cultural traditions while adapting to local environments. The arrival of Islam in the 7th century, with the Arab conquests of Persia and parts of Central Asia, introduced another major religious and cultural force into the Silk Road milieu. The spread of Islam was a gradual process, particularly in Central Asia, often facilitated by merchants, Sufi mystics, and the eventual conversion of local rulers, rather than solely by military conquest in all areas. Initially, Islam coexisted with the established faiths of the region, but over centuries it became the dominant religion in Persia, Mesopotamia, and much of Central Asia, profoundly reshaping the cultural and intellectual landscape. Islamic scholars and institutions would later play a crucial role in preserving, synthesizing, and advancing knowledge drawn from Greek, Persian, and Indian traditions, much of which was then transmitted further along the Silk Road. This remarkable religious pluralism and interaction was a defining characteristic of the Silk Road. Oasis cities often housed Buddhist monasteries, Nestorian churches, Manichaean temples, Zoroastrian fire altars, Jewish synagogues, and later Islamic mosques, sometimes in close proximity. While this coexistence was not always harmonious, there were periods of persecution, rivalry, and theological debate, it also fostered a degree of mutual awareness, borrowing, and syncretism. Religious ideas, artistic motifs, philosophical concepts, and even deities sometimes crossed religious boundaries, creating unique hybrid forms and contributing to the rich cultural ferment that made the Silk Road more than just a conduit for material goods. It was a vibrant laboratory of spiritual and intellectual exchange. The great oasis cities and towns that punctuated the vast and often desolate landscapes of the Silk Road were the lifeblood of this transcontinental network. They were not merely passive stopovers, but dynamic, multicultural hubs of commerce, craftsmanship, agriculture, and intellectual exchange, each with its own unique character and history, yet all interconnected by the ceaseless flow of caravans. Imagine arriving at one of these sanctuaries after weeks or months, traversing barren deserts or treacherous mountain passes. The sight of city walls rising from the plains, the verdant green of irrigated fields, the promise of fresh water, food, and rest would have been profoundly welcome. Let us paint a picture of some of these pivotal urban centers. Samarkand, ancient Marakanda, in modern Uzbekistan, was one of the oldest and most celebrated cities of Central Asia. its history stretching back to the first millennium BCE. Strategically located in the fertile Zarafshan Valley, it was a major center of Sogdian culture and commerce. Renowned for its skilled artisans, particularly in paper production after the technology arrived from China, textiles, and metalwork, Samarkand was a vibrant entrepot where goods from China, India, Persia, and the nomadic steppes converged. Later, under rulers like Tamerlane in the 14th century, it would be adorned with magnificent Islamic architecture, such as the Registan Square, becoming a jewel of the East. Nearby Bukhara, another ancient Sogdian city, was famed for its carpets, its centers of Islamic learning, madrasas, and mosques like the Kalyan minaret, and its bustling markets. It, too, was a vital node, attracting merchants and scholars from afar. Khotan, situated on the southern rim of the Taklamakan Desert in the Tarim Basin, modern Xinjiang, China, was a major Buddhist kingdom, renowned for its jade. Nephrite from the nearby Kunlun Mountains had been prized in China for millennia. Silk production, legend attributes the smuggling of sericulture from China to a Khotanese princess. Carpets and Buddhist scholarship. Khotanese monks and scholars played a significant role in translating Buddhist texts, and the kingdom maintained close ties with both India and China. Kashgar, Kashi, at the western edge of the Tarim Basin where the northern and southern routes around the Taklamakan converged before heading towards the formidable Pamir Passes, was another critical junction. A bustling market city with a diverse population of Uyghurs, Tajiks, Kyrgyz, and others, Kashgar's Sunday market remains legendary even today, a distant echo of its ancient role as a crossroads of cultures and commerce. Turfan, Gaochang or Kocho, located in a deep depression on the northern edge of the Taklamakan, was a vital oasis sustained by an ingenious system of underground irrigation channels known as kanats or karez. It was home to diverse communities, including Sogdians, Tocharians, and later Uyghurs, who made it their capital. Turfan was a significant center for Buddhism and Manichaeism, and its arid climate has preserved remarkable archaeological remains, including ruined cities, cave temples like Bezeklik, and numerous manuscripts. Merv, ancient Antiochia Margiana, later Marv, in modern Turkmenistan, was one of the largest and most important cities on the Silk Road in Persia and Central Asia. Situated in a vast oasis in the Karakum Desert, watered by the Murghab River, Merv was a major center of Sasanian and later Islamic culture, learning, and trade, renowned for its libraries, mosques, and production of textiles and steel. It was a crucial link between Persia, Transoxiana, and Khorasan. Further west, Palmyra, in the Syrian desert, though perhaps peaking slightly earlier, was a quintessential caravan city. A wealthy oasis kingdom that flourished as an intermediary between the Roman Empire and Parthia Persia, Palmyra controlled trade routes across the desert, its merchants growing rich on the transit of goods like silk, spices, and incense. Its magnificent ruins with colonnaded streets, temples, and funerary towers attest to its former splendor and its fusion of Greco-Roman and Near Eastern cultures. Life in these oasis cities was a tapestry woven from many threads. The core of their existence was often agriculture, made possible by sophisticated irrigation techniques. The Qanat system, originating in Persia, was a marvel of ancient engineering consisting of gently sloping underground tunnels that tapped into subterranean water tables at the foot of mountains and carried water for many kilometers to irrigate fields and supply cities, minimizing evaporation in the arid climate. These irrigated lands produced grains, wheat, barley, millet, fruits, grapes, melons, pomegranates, apricots, peaches, vegetables, and cotton. The marketplaces, bazaars, were the vibrant hearts of these cities, a riot of sights, sounds, and smells. Here, merchants haggled over prices in a multitude of tongues, their stalls laden with exotic wares. You might find bolts of lustrous Chinese silk next to bales of Indian cotton, sacks of fragrant spices from the East Indies, Roman glassware, Persian metalwork, Khotanese jade, Central Asian carpets, furs from the northern steppes, paper from Samarkand, and locally produced crafts. Food vendors would offer roasted meats, breads, fruits, and perhaps fermented mare's milk, kumis, or wine. Money changers would exchange currencies from different empires. Scribes would offer their services to draft contracts or letters. The population of these cities was remarkably diverse. Alongside the indigenous inhabitants, there were often substantial communities of foreign merchants who settled, sometimes in designated quarters. Sogdians, Persians, Indians, Arabs, Jews, Chinese, and others. This ethnic and cultural mosaic was mirrored in the religious landscape, with Buddhist monasteries, Nestorian churches, Manichaean temples, Zoroastrian fire altars, Jewish synagogues, and eventually Islamic mosques, often coexisting, though not always without tension. The life of a long-distance merchant was one of considerable risk, but also potentially immense profit. Merchants often traveled in large caravans for mutual protection against bandits and the harsh environment. Camels, particularly the two-humped Bactrian camel, were the primary beasts of burden, perfectly adapted to desert travel, capable of carrying heavy loads and surviving for long periods without water. Horses and donkeys were also used. Caravanserais, roadside inns or fortified compounds, were established along the routes, offering shelter, food, water, and fodder for animals, as well as a place for merchants to rest, trade, and exchange. Information. These were vital nodes in the network, often managed by local communities or religious institutions. Merchants needed to be multilingual, skilled negotiators, and possess a deep understanding of different cultures, customs, and market conditions. They often relied on complex networks of agents, partners, and family connections across vast distances. Letters of credit and other rudimentary financial instruments were sometimes used to facilitate transactions and reduce the risk of carrying large amounts of bullion. Beyond the merchants, these cities were home to a wide array of artisans: weavers, dyers, potters, metal workers, jewelers, leather workers, paper makers, whose skills contributed to the local economy and the production of goods for trade. Farmers, of course, formed the backbone of the agricultural oases. Monks, priests, and scholars populated the religious institutions, engaged in study, teaching, translation, and spiritual practices. Entertainers, musicians, dancers, acrobats, storytellers provided diversion and cultural expression. And, like all societies of the time, there were also slaves, often captives of war or victims of raids, who performed various forms of labor. The Silk Road was not just a route for luxury goods, it was also, tragically, a conduit for the slave trade. The languages spoken along the Silk Road were incredibly diverse, reflecting the multitude of peoples involved. While major imperial languages like Chinese, Persian, Greek, Latin, and later Arabic served as lingua francas in certain regions or for specific purposes, it was often regional languages that dominated local exchange. Sogdian, an Eastern Iranian language, became a particularly important commercial lingua franca across much of Central Asia for several centuries. Its Aramaic-derived script used for business correspondence and religious texts. Other languages encountered along the routes included various Turkic dialects, Tocharian, an extinct Indo-European language spoken in the Tarim Basin, Khotanese Saka, another Eastern Iranian language, Bactrian, Sanskrit, Prakrit, Tibetan, and Syriac. The ability to communicate across these linguistic barriers was a crucial skill for anyone involved in Silk Road interactions. The oasis cities, therefore, were far more than just dots on a map. They were complex, vibrant, and often precarious. Islands of civilization in a challenging world sustained by human ingenuity, agricultural innovation, and the ceaseless desire for commerce and cultural exchange. They were the crucibles where the diverse elements carried along the Silk Road were received, transformed, and then passed on, contributing to the rich and dynamic tapestry of Eurasian history. The Tang dynasty, 618 to 907 CE in China, is widely regarded as one of the most brilliant and cosmopolitan periods in Chinese history, and it coincided with what many historians consider the absolute zenith of the Silk Road's activity and cultural significance. The early Tang emperors, particularly Taizong, are 649 and Xuanzong, here 756, prior to the Anlushan rebellion, presided over a reunified, powerful, and remarkably outward-looking empire. Their capital, Chang'an, modern Xi'an, became a metropolis of unparalleled scale and splendor, arguably the largest and most populous city in the world at the time, with estimates suggesting its population, including its vast suburbs, may have exceeded 1 million and possibly approached 2 million inhabitants. Chang'an was meticulously planned on a vast grid system, with wide, tree-lined avenues, enclosed wards, Fang, for residential and commercial activities, and 2 enormous marketplaces, the West Market, Xixi, and the East Market, Dongxi. The West Market in particular was renowned for its international character, a bustling hub where merchants from across Asia and beyond congregated. Here, one could find Sogdians, Persians, Arabs, Turks, Uyghurs, Tibetans, Indians, Koreans, Japanese, and even individuals from as far as the Byzantine Empire. They lived, traded, and often established their own religious institutions, Nestorian churches, Manichaean temples, Zoroastrian shrines, and later mosques, within the city. The air in the West Market would have been thick with the aroma of exotic spices, incense, and food, and the cacophony of countless languages bargaining over goods from every corner of the known world. Tang poetry and literature are filled with descriptions of these Hu, Western barbarian, a term often used for Central Asians, merchants, their distinctive features, clothing, and the exotic wares they brought. The Tang government actively fostered and controlled the Silk Road trade. They reasserted Chinese military and political influence deep into Central Asia, establishing the Protectorate General to pacify the West, Angxi Duduhu, with garrisons in key oasis towns of the Tarim Basin, such as Kucha, Khotan, Kashgar, and Beshbalik near Turfan. This provided a degree of stability and security along the eastern sections of the routes, encouraging the flow of caravans. Official envoys, tribute missions, and merchant delegations regularly traveled between Chang'an and the states of Central Asia, Persia, India, and even the Byzantine Empire, referred to in Chinese sources as Fulin. The Tang maintained an efficient postal relay system and invested in infrastructure like roads and canals, which also benefited trade. Tang China was a major exporter of high-quality goods. Silk, of course, remained paramount, produced in even Hami greater varieties, quantities, and artistic sophistication than before, with intricate patterns and vibrant colors. Tang silks were highly prized throughout Asia and the West. Beyond silk, Tang ceramics achieved new heights of artistry and technical skill. Of green-glazed stoneware, celadon, and xingware, a fine white porcelain, were exported widely. The most iconic Tang ceramic export, however, was sankai, 3-color, glazed earthenware, typically featuring vibrant lead glazes in green, amber, yellow-brown, and cream, often used for funerary objects like figurines of camels, horses, court ladies, officials, and foreign merchants, vividly capturing the cosmopolitan life of the era. Tea, which had become a popular beverage within China during the Tang, began its slow journey westward, initially perhaps more as a medicinal herb or a curiosity, but gradually gaining wider acceptance. Paper, another crucial Chinese invention, was by now widely produced and exported, playing a vital role in the dissemination of knowledge. Chinese metalwork, particularly bronze mirrors with intricate cosmological designs, and fine lacquerware also found markets along the Silk Road. This openness was decidedly a two-way street. Tong China exhibited a remarkable curiosity and receptivity to foreign cultures and influences. Central Asian music and dance became immensely popular at the Tang court and among the urban elite. Musicians and dancers from Kucha, Samarkand, Bukhara, and other oasis kingdoms performed in Chang'an, introducing new instruments like the pipa, a lute-like instrument of Central Asian origin, melodies and energetic Hu dances, such as the Sogdian whirl. Foreign fashions, hairstyles, and even sports like polo, which originated in Persia or Central Asia, were adopted with enthusiasm by the Tang aristocracy. Exotic foods, spices, fruits, like grapes and pomegranates, introduced earlier but popularized during the Tang, and ingredients from the West enriched Chinese cuisine. Foreign religions, as discussed, found a relatively tolerant environment, at least in the early to mid-Tang period, with Buddhism reaching its apogee of influence, and Nestorianism, Manichaeism, and Zoroastrianism establishing communities. This period saw a flourishing of cultural exchange, with Tang culture itself becoming a dominant civilizing influence in East Asia, profoundly shaping the development of Korea, Japan, and Vietnam, whose scholars, monks, and officials frequently visited Chang'an to learn and bring back Chinese institutions, writing systems, art, and philosophy. However, this golden age was not to last indefinitely. The Tang dynasty began to experience serious internal strains and external pressures from the mid-8th century. The An-Lushan Rebellion, 755-763 CE, a devastating uprising led by a powerful general of Sogdian Turkic origin, shook the empire to its core. Though eventually suppressed, the rebellion severely weakened the central government, led to enormous loss of life and destruction, and resulted in a significant loss of Tang control over the Tarim Basin and other western territories. The Tibetan Empire took advantage of Tang weakness to expand its influence in Central Asia, at times even briefly capturing Chang'an. The Uyghur Khaganate also rose to prominence, sometimes as allies of the Tang, sometimes as rivals. These political upheavals disrupted the stability of the Silk Road, made travel more dangerous, and reduced the volume of transcontinental trade for periods. The later Tang period also saw a rise in xenophobia and a backlash against foreign influences, culminating in persecutions of foreign religions, notably Buddhism, in the mid-9th century, e.g., the Huicheng persecution of 845 CE, which saw many monasteries closed, monks and nuns laicized, and religious property confiscated. While the Tang dynasty lingered on until 907 CE, its later years were marked by increasing decentralization, warlordism, and peasant uprisings, leading to a decline in its ability to project power and protect trade along the Silk Road. Despite this eventual decline, the Tang era remains a high-water mark in the history of the Silk Road, a period of unprecedented openness, cosmopolitanism, and vibrant cultural exchange that left an indelible imprint on Chinese civilization and its interactions with the wider world. The wealth of art, literature, and historical records from this period provides us with an extraordinarily rich picture of the Silk Road at its most dynamic. Simultaneously with the flourishing of the Tang dynasty in the East, the rise and consolidation of the Islamic caliphates in the West and Central Asia ushered in another era of profound intellectual, commercial, and cultural dynamism, often referred to as the Islamic Golden Age, roughly 8th to 13th, 14th centuries. The Arab conquests of the 7th and early 8th centuries had brought vast territories, including Persia, Mesopotamia, Syria, Egypt, North Africa, and parts of Central Asia, Transoxiana, and the Iberian Peninsula, under a unified political and increasingly religious and cultural dominion. After the Umayyad Caliphate, 661-750 CE, with its capital in Damascus, the Abbasid Caliphate, 750-1258 CE, rose to power and established its magnificent new capital in Baghdad. Baghdad, founded in 762 CE by Caliph al-Mansur on the banks of the Tigris River, was conceived as a round city, Madinat al-Salam, City of Peace, and quickly became one of the largest, wealthiest, and most intellectually vibrant cities in the world, a true rival to Changchun. It was strategically located at the crossroads of major trade routes, both land and riverine, connecting Persia, Arabia, the Mediterranean, and Central Asia. Under enlightened Abbasid caliphs like Harun al-Rashid of 1001 Nights fame and his son al-Ma'mun, Baghdad became a glittering center of learning and culture. Al-Ma'mun famously established the Bait al-Hikmah, House of Wisdom in Baghdad, a major library, translation institute, and research center. Here, scholars from diverse religious and ethnic backgrounds, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Zoroastrian, Sabian, collaborated to translate ancient Greek, Persian, Pahlavi, Syriac, and Sanskrit texts on philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, medicine, alchemy, geography, and engineering into Arabic. This monumental translation movement not only preserved vast amounts of ancient knowledge that might otherwise have been lost, but also laid the foundation for original contributions by Islamic scholars, figures like al-Khwarizmi, from whose name we derive algorithm and who developed algebra, al-Kindi, philosopher, al-Razi, Rhazes, physician and alchemist, Ibn Sina, Avicenna, philosopher and physician whose canon of medicine became a standard text in Europe for centuries, al-Biruni, polymath who wrote extensively on India, and Omar Khayyam, poet, mathematician, and astronomer, made groundbreaking advances in their respective fields. The Islamic world, increasingly unified by the Arabic language as a lingua franca of scholarship, administration, and commerce, and by a shared, though internally diverse, Islamic faith, became a vast zone of relative free trade and intellectual exchange, Arab and Persian merchants building on long-standing commercial traditions of the Near East became highly active players in both overland and maritime trade. They developed sophisticated business practices, including partnerships, mudaraba, musharaka, letters of credit, suftaja, bills of exchange, hawala, and joint stock companies, which facilitated long-distance commerce and reduced risk. Their dhows, sailing ships with lateen sails, well-suited for monsoon winds, dominated the maritime routes of the Indian Ocean, connecting East Africa, Swahili coast, Arabia, the Persian Gulf, the western and eastern coasts of India, Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia, Srivijaya, Malacca, and even southern China, ports like Guangzhou Canton, where foreign merchant communities existed. This flourishing maritime Silk Road, sometimes called the Spice Route, carried bulk goods like spices, textiles, timber, and ceramics more efficiently than overland caravans. Along the traditional land routes of the Silk Road, merchants from the Islamic world continued to traverse the paths through Persia and Central Asia. Cities like Nishapur in Khorasan, Persia, Balkh, ancient Bactria in Afghanistan, Herat, Afghanistan, Samarkand, and Bukhara in Transoxiana. Now major centers of Islamic culture and learning under dynasties like the Samanids, 819-999 CE, a Persian dynasty that patronized a revival of Persian language and literature, the Ghaznavids, 970-1186 CE, a Turkic dynasty, and later the Seljuks, a powerful Turkic empire that rose in the 11th century, continued to thrive as vital commercial and manufacturing hubs. They produced high-quality textiles, including tiraz fabrics inscribed with rulers' names, ceramics, metalwork, and paper. Samarkand became particularly famous for its paper production after the technology was introduced from China. reputedly after the Battle of Talas in 751 CE, when Chinese prisoners of war included papermakers. The spread of Islam itself into Central Asia was a gradual process that occurred over several centuries, often facilitated by merchants, Sufi mystics, who often adopted a more adaptable and syncretic approach, and the eventual conversion of local Turkic and Iranian rulers. This led to the development of a rich and distinctive Perso-Islamic civilization in Central Asia, which blended Islamic teachings with existing Persian and Turkic cultural traditions. Renowned scholars, poets, theologians, and artists emerged from this region, contributing significantly to the broader Islamic Golden Age. The knowledge and technologies accumulated and developed within the Islamic world also flowed along the Silk Road. Advances in mathematics, including the adoption and popularization of the Hindu-Arabic numeral system, including zero, which revolutionized calculation, astronomy, observatories, astronomical tables or ZIJ, medicine, hospitals or bimaristan, surgical techniques, pharmacology, optics, Ibn al-Haytham al-Hazan's work on vision, chemistry, alchemy, distillation, new chemical compounds, agriculture, introduction of new crops like sugarcane, rice, citrus fruits, and cotton to new regions, and improved irrigation techniques, and paper production spread, both eastward and westward, eventually reaching Europe, often via Islamic Spain and Sicily, or through contacts during the Crusades, and having a profound impact on the European Renaissance and scientific revolution. Conversely, ideas and technologies from China, such as papermaking, printing, though its impact in the Islamic world was more limited initially, gunpowder, which the Muslims adapted and developed for military use, and the compass also reached the Islamic world and were further refined or disseminated. This period, therefore, saw the Silk Road acting as a vital conduit not just for goods, but for a vibrant intellectual and technological exchange between the major civilizations of Eurasia, China, India, Persia, the Islamic world, and indirectly, Europe. The relative stability and prosperity provided by large empires like the Tang and the Abbasids, coupled with the dynamism of merchant communities and the intellectual curiosity of scholars, created an environment where the Silk Road could function as a true bridge of civilizations, fostering a remarkable cross-pollination of ideas and innovations that profoundly shaped the course of world history. The 13th and 14th centuries ushered in one of the most dramatic and transformative epochs in the entire history of the Silk Road, the rise, zenith, and eventual fragmentation of the Mongol Empire. Originating from the harsh, windswept steppes of Mongolia, various nomadic tribes were unified under the charismatic and ruthless leadership of Temujin, who, at a great assembly, Kurultai in 1206, was proclaimed Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. What followed was an unprecedented wave of conquests, as Mongol armies renowned for their equestrian skills, discipline, compound bows, and sophisticated military tactics, swept across Asia and into Eastern Europe with astonishing speed and ferocity. Within a few decades, Genghis Khan and his successors, Ogadai, Guyuk, Munka, and Kublai, forged the largest contiguous land empire in human history, a colossal domain that, at its peak, stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the Danube River, encompassing China, Korea, Central Asia, Persia, Mesopotamia, Armenia, Georgia, the Russian principalities, and parts of Eastern Europe. The initial Mongol conquests were often characterized by appalling brutality, wholesale massacres of resistant populations, and the utter devastation of cities and agricultural lands. Regions that defied Mongol rule were often subjected to horrific retribution, which undoubtedly caused immense disruption to settled life, trade, and existing political structures. Cities like Samarkand, Bukhara, Merv, Herat, Kiev, and Baghdad, sacked in 1258, effectively ending the Abbasid Caliphate, suffered catastrophic destruction. This period of conquest certainly brought terror and upheaval to many parts of the Silk Road. However, once Mongol authority was firmly established across these vast territories, a remarkable phenomenon occurred: the emergence of the Pax Mongolica, or Mongol peace, during the latter half of the 13th century and the first half of the 14th century. The Mongols, despite their nomadic origins and initial destructiveness, were pragmatic rulers who quickly recognized the economic benefits of facilitating and protecting trade and communication across their immense empire. They imposed a unified, albeit often harsh, legal code known as the Yasa, attributed to Genghis Khan, ruthlessly suppressed banditry and local warfare, and created an environment where overland travel across Eurasia became safer and more efficient than it had been for centuries. It was said that a maiden laden with gold could travel unmolested from one end of the Mongol Empire to the other. While likely an exaggeration, it reflected the relative security that Mongol rule brought to the major trade routes. A cornerstone of this Mongol-facilitated connectivity was the Yam system, a highly organized and remarkably efficient postal and relay station network that the Mongols adopted from earlier models, like those of the Khitans and Jurchens, and vastly expanded and improved. The Yam consisted of a series of well-provisioned relay stations, orts or jam, established at regular intervals, typically a day's ride, around 25-30 miles, along all major routes throughout the empire. These stations were staffed, supplied with fresh horses, sometimes tens of thousands were maintained for the Yam, food and lodging, and were maintained by the local population under strict Mongol supervision. Official messengers, envoys, and authorized travelers carrying a tablet of authority, paisa or gereja, often made of gold, silver, bronze, or wood, depending on rank, and inscribed with the Khan's decree, could obtain fresh mounts and provisions, allowing them to travel at extraordinary speeds. Marco Polo described how messages could travel 250 miles a day using the system. The Yam was not only crucial for Mongol military and administrative communication, but also greatly facilitated the journeys of merchants, diplomats, and missionaries across the empire. Under the relative stability of the Pax Mongolica, direct contact and exchange between Europe and East Asia reached an unprecedented level. Although the Mongol Empire eventually fragmented into several large successor khanates, the Yuan dynasty in China and Mongolia, ruled by the descendants of Kublai Khan, the Ilkhanate in Persia and Mesopotamia, founded by Hulagu Khan of the Fov, Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, descended from Genghis Khan's second son, Chagatai, and the Golden Horde in southern Russia, and the Pontic Steppe, founded by Batu Khan, these khanates, at least initially, maintained relatively close political and economic ties, forming a somewhat cohesive trans-Eurasian political and commercial space. This opened up new possibilities for long-distance travel and trade. European merchants, particularly from Italian city-states like Venice and Genoa, were quick to capitalize on these new opportunities. The most famous of these were the Venetian Polos, the brothers Niccolo and Maffeo, and Niccolo's son, Marco. Their epic journeys, which spanned several decades in the latter half of the 13th century, took them from Venice across the Black Sea, through Mongol-controlled territories in Persia and Central Asia, following routes both north and south of the Taklamakan, and eventually to the magnificent court of Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan, who had completed the Mongol conquest of Song China and established the Yuan dynasty with his capital at Khanbalik, Dadu, modern-day Beijing. Marco Polo, according to his own account, gained the favor of Kublai Khan and served him for some 17 years, roughly 1275-1292, undertaking various diplomatic and administrative missions that took him to many parts of the vast Yuan Empire, from the southern provinces bordering Burma and Vietnam to the northern steppes. His detailed descriptions of his travels, Il Milione, the travels of Marco Polo, dictated to Rustichello da Pisa while Marco was a prisoner of war in Genoa, became a literary sensation in late medieval Europe. Though its complete factual accuracy and some of its more fantastical claims have been and continue to be debated by historians, some scholars question whether he reached China at all or if he compiled his account from other sources. The Hofbräu's travels provided Europeans with an unparalleled, vivid, and often awe-inspiring panorama of the wealth, power, sophistication, and exotic wonders of Mongol China, Cathay, and other parts of Asia, Zipangu, Japan, India, Southeast Asia. Marco Polo described the grandeur of Khan Balik, its grid layout, palaces, and bustling commerce, the use of paper money and coal as fuel, the efficient administration and postal system, the yam, the advanced infrastructure of canals and roads, and the diverse customs, products, and religions of the East. His book profoundly shaped European perceptions of Asia for centuries, fueling curiosity, a desire for Eastern riches, and later, the impetus for the age of exploration. Other Europeans also ventured eastward during the Pax Mongolica, primarily missionaries and envoys sent by European rulers or the Pope, hoping to gather intelligence about the Mongols, forge potential alliances, often against Islamic powers in the Middle East, or convert the Mongol Khans to Christianity. Franciscan and Dominican friars, accustomed to long and arduous journeys, were prominent in these missions. Giovanni da Pian del Carpine, a Franciscan friar sent by Pope Innocent IV, traveled to the Mongol imperial capital of Karakorum in Mongolia between 1245 and 1247, attending the election of Guyuk Khan as Great Khan. His Historia Mongolorum, History of the Mongols, is a valuable and generally reliable first-hand account of Mongol society, customs, military organization, and history. Another Franciscan, William of Rubruck, was dispatched by King Louis IX of France and journeyed to Karakorum between 1253 and 1255 during the reign of Mongke Khan. His detailed and observant report, the Itinerarium, provides an even richer ethnographic account of his travels, his encounters with Mongols of all ranks, and his observations of the diverse religious communities at the Mongol court, including Nestorian Christians, Buddhists, Taoists, and Muslims. He famously participated in a religious debate before Mongke Khan. John of Montecorvino, also a Franciscan, embarked on a mission to the east in the late 13th century, eventually reaching Khan Balik around 1294. He established a successful Christian Catholic mission there, reportedly baptizing thousands, building churches, translating the New Testament and Psalms into the Mongol language, or possibly Uyghur script used by Mongols, and training a choir of boys. In 1307, Pope Clement V appointed him Archbishop of Khan Balik and Patriarch of the Orient, sending other friars to assist him. Odoric of Pordenone, another Franciscan, traveled extensively in Asia between 1318 and 1330, visiting India, Sumatra, Java, Borneo, and spending several years in China, including Khan Balik, leaving behind a popular travelogue filled with wonders and observations. These missions, while ultimately unsuccessful in converting the Mongol leadership en masse or forging lasting political alliances, contributed significantly to European geographical knowledge of Asia and demonstrated the feasibility of trans-Eurasian travel under Mongol rule. The Mongol courts themselves, particularly that of Kublai Khan in Khanbalik and the Ilkhans in Persia, e.g. at Tabriz, became remarkable melting pots of cultures and centers of international exchange. The Mongols, as pragmatic rulers of diverse sedentary populations, often co-opted and employed skilled administrators, artisans, scholars, physicians, and engineers from the various peoples they conquered: Persians, Arabs, Uyghurs, Tibetans, Chinese, Armenians, Georgians, Kipchak Turks, Alans from the Caucasus, Russians, and even some Europeans, Like the Polos, if Marco's account is to be believed, served in the Mongol administrations, armies, and courts. This facilitated an unprecedented movement of people, skills, and ideas across the vast breadth of the empire. For instance, Persian astronomers, mathematicians, and siege engineers were highly valued in Yuan China. Rashid al-Din Hamadani, Amai, Jewish physician and vizier to the Ilkhans in Persia, wrote a monumental Compendium of Chronicles, Jami al-Tarawik, a universal history that drew on sources from across Eurasia, including Chinese and Indian informants. Chinese physicians, artists, and hydraulic engineers found employment in Persia and other parts of the Mongol world. This cross-pollination was particularly evident in the arts. Chinese artistic motifs, such as dragons, phoenixes, peonies, and lotus flowers, as well as landscape painting techniques, became highly influential in Persian art, particularly in manuscript illumination and ceramics produced under the Ilkhans. Conversely, Persian influences, such as the use of cobalt blue pigment for underglaze decoration, played a crucial role in the development of the iconic blue and white porcelain that became a hallmark of Chinese ceramics from the Yuan dynasty. Onwards, architectural styles and decorative techniques also showed evidence of this fusion. Key technologies also spread more rapidly and widely during the Mongol era. Gunpowder, invented in China centuries earlier, had been used in primitive firearms, bombs, and rockets. The Mongols quickly adopted and adapted gunpowder weapons for their siege warfare, and knowledge of these weapons, along with gunpowder itself, disseminated westward with greater speed, reaching the Islamic world and Europe by the late 13th and early 14th centuries, where it would eventually revolutionize military technology and tactics. Printing technology, particularly woodblock printing, which was well established in China and Korea, where movable metal type was also developed, may have also seen some diffusion westward, though its direct impact on the European development of printing with movable type by Gutenberg in the mid-15th century is complex and debated. The magnetic compass, another Chinese invention crucial for navigation, became more widely known and used, both overland and at sea. Conversely, scientific and technical knowledge from the Islamic world, particularly in fields like astronomy, Ptolemaic astronomy, astronomical instruments like the astrolabe, and observational data from observatories like Maraga in Persia, mathematics, algebra, trigonometry, and medicine, pharmacology, clinical practices, was transmitted to China, where it influenced Chinese scholarship during the Yuan period. For example, the Yuan dynasty established an Islamic astronomical bureau in Khanbalik alongside the traditional Chinese one. However, this unprecedented interconnectedness fostered by the Pax Mongolica also had a profoundly devastating and unintended consequence: the accelerated spread of infectious diseases across Eurasia. The same trade routes and armies that facilitated the movement of people, goods, and ideas also became terrifyingly efficient conduits for pathogens. The most catastrophic of these was the bubonic plague, which caused the pandemic known as the Black Death. While the exact origins and initial pathways of the Yersinia pestis bacterium are still subjects of scholarly research, many historians believe it originated in plague reservoirs among wild rodent populations in Central Asia, perhaps around Lake Issyk-Kul in modern Kyrgyzstan, where 14th century Nestorian grave sites have inscriptions mentioning plague. From these reservoirs, it is thought to have spread via infected fleas carried by black rats, Rattus rattus, which often infested merchant caravans, ships, and Mongol armies. The plague began to move westward along the Silk Road in the early Song to mid-14th century. By the 1340s, it had reached the Crimea, a major trading hub on the Black Sea controlled by the Genoese. The Genoese port of Kaffa, modern Feodosia, was besieged by the Golden Horde forces under Janibeg Khan in 1346-1347. According to contemporary accounts, like that of Gabriele de Musi, the Mongols, suffering from the plague themselves, catapulted. Plague infected corpses over the city walls, in an early instance of biological warfare. Genoese ships fleeing Caffa are believed to have carried the plague to Constantinople, Messina, Sicily, Genoa, Venice, and Marseille in late 1347 and early 1348. From these Mediterranean ports, the Black Death spread with terrifying speed throughout Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, following trade routes both maritime and terrestrial. The demographic impact of the Black Death was unparalleled in recorded history. It is estimated to have killed between 30% and 60% of Europe's population between 1347 and 1351, with recurrent outbreaks for centuries thereafter. The Islamic world also suffered immense mortality, with some regions losing a third or more of their populations. The plague also swept through parts of Asia, including China, though the data here is less precise. The consequences were profound and far-reaching, shaking societies to their core. It led to severe labor shortages, which in some regions empowered peasants and workers, contributing to social unrest and the decline of feudalism. It also led to economic disruption, religious questioning, and fanaticism, like the Flagellant movement, persecution of minorities. Jews were often scapegoated and accused of poisoning wells, and a pervasive sense of morbidity and pessimism that influenced art and literature. The Black Death undoubtedly contributed to the decline and fragmentation of the Mongol Empire itself by weakening its manpower, disrupting its administration, and undermining the trade and communication networks upon which its cohesion depended. The mid to late 14th century, the vast Mongol Empire, already strained by internal rivalries, succession struggles, and the challenges of governing diverse sedentary populations, began to definitively fragment and lose its unified impetus. In China, growing resentment against Mongol rule, coupled with natural disasters and peasant rebellions, led to the overthrow of the Yuan dynasty by the native Ming dynasty, founded by Zhu Yuanzhang, Emperor Hongwu, in 1368. The Ilkhanate in Diorchwe. Persia had already disintegrated into several rival successor states by the mid-14th century. The Golden Horde in southern Russia gradually weakened and broke apart into smaller khanates like Kazan, Astrakhan, and Crimea over the following century, facing increasing pressure from rising Russian principalities like Moscow. The Chagatai, Khanate in Central Asia, also experienced internal divisions and conflicts, though a semblance of Mongol power would later be revived in the region by Timur, Tamerlane. This political fragmentation led to renewed instability and warfare across many regions, making overland travel more dangerous, disrupting the unified commercial space created by the Pax Mongolica, and making the great transcontinental arteries of the Silk Road more perilous and less frequented by long-distance merchants. The era of unparalleled Mongol-facilitated connectivity was drawing to a close, though its impact would resonate for centuries. The decline of the Mongol Empire's unified hegemony in the latter half of the 14th century, coupled with the devastating impact of the Black Death, marked a significant turning point in the history of the Silk Road. While overland trade by no means ceased entirely, its scale and transcontinental character began to diminish, giving way to the increasing prominence of maritime routes. Several interconnected factors contributed to this gradual but profound shift in the patterns of global commerce. Advances in shipbuilding and navigation were crucial. In Europe, the late Middle Ages saw the development of more robust and seaworthy vessels like the carrack, a 3- or 4-masted ocean-going ship, often square-rigged on the fore and mainmasts and latten-rigged on the mizzen. And later, the caravel, a smaller, lighter ship, often lateen-rigged, favored by Portuguese explorers for its maneuverability and ability to sail windward. These ships were capable of undertaking longer voyages, carrying larger cargoes, and being armed with cannons, making them more defensible. Navigational techniques also improved with wider use of the magnetic compass, introduced from China, the astrolabe and quadrant for determining latitude, more accurate nautical charts, Portolan charts, and better understanding of wind patterns and ocean currents. In the Indian Ocean, Arab, Persian, Indian, and Southeast Asian mariners had long possessed sophisticated shipbuilding and navigational skills, using dhows with lateen sails perfectly adapted to the monsoon wind systems. In China, the early Ming dynasty, under Emperor Yongle R. 1402-1424, sponsored a series of spectacular maritime expeditions led by the Admiral Zheng He between 1405 and 1433. These expeditions involved enormous treasure fleets, baoquan, some ships reportedly being of colossal size, dwarfing contemporary European vessels, and visited numerous ports in Southeast Asia, India, the Persian Gulf, Arabia, and East Africa. The purposes of Zheng He's voyages were complex, likely including diplomacy, projecting Ming power, and re-establishing tributary relationships, exploration, and the facilitation of trade. These voyages demonstrated China's formidable naval capabilities and its potential to dominate Indian Ocean maritime routes. However, after Emperor Yonggle's death and due to a combination of factors, including the immense cost of the expeditions, a shift in political priorities towards defending the northern frontiers against resurgent Mongol threats, and Confucian scholar officials' traditional disdain for commerce and foreign entanglements, these state-sponsored maritime ventures were abruptly curtailed. The Ming government subsequently adopted a more inward-looking policy, imposing restrictions on private maritime trade, the Haijin or sea ban, though smuggling and unofficial trade continued. This decision effectively ceded dominance of the Indian Ocean sea lanes to other players. The Indian Ocean had in fact long been a vibrant arena of maritime commerce, a maritime Silk Road in its own right. It was a complex network of interconnected circuits linking East Africa, the Swahili coast, trading gold, ivory, and slaves, Arabia, frankincense, myrrh, horses, the Persian Gulf, pearls, textiles, the western coast of India, Gujarat, Malabar, exporting spices like pepper, cotton textiles, precious stones, the eastern coast of India, Coromandel, Bengal, trading textiles and rice, Sri Lanka, cinnamon gems, Southeast Asia, Srivijaya, Majapahit, Malacca, controlling the vital straits and exporting spices like cloves, nutmeg, mace, as well as aromatic woods and resins, and southern China, exporting silk, porcelain, and tea. This maritime trade was often more efficient and economical for transporting bulk goods compared to the slow, costly, and labor-intensive overland camel caravans. The rise of the Ottoman Empire in the 14th and 15th centuries also played a significant role. The Ottomans, a powerful Turkic state, expanded rapidly from their base in Anatolia, conquering Byzantine territories in the Balkans and Anatolia, and eventually capturing Constantinople in 1453, which they renamed Istanbul and made their new capital. This event marked the definitive end of the Byzantine Empire and gave the Ottomans control over a strategic crossroads between Europe and Asia, including the western termini of many traditional Silk Road land routes and key maritime choke points in the eastern Mediterranean and Black Sea. The Ottomans also expanded into Syria, Egypt, conquering the Mamluk Sultanate in 1517, and North Africa, further consolidating their control over trade routes. While the Ottomans did not necessarily block trade with the East, they themselves were major participants and beneficiaries of this commerce, levying taxes and customs duties. Their dominance, their intermittent conflicts with European powers, particularly Venice and the Habsburgs, and the prices charged by Ottoman and Venetian intermediaries for Eastern goods further incentivized Western European nations, particularly those on the Atlantic seaboard like Portugal and Spain, to seek alternative, direct all-sea routes to the spice-producing regions of Asia. This quest culminated in the European Age of Exploration. driven by a potent mix of motives: the desire for direct access to valuable spices, pepper, cloves, nutmeg, cinnamon, which were enormously profitable in Europe, the ambition to outflank Islamic powers, the search for precious metals, gold and silver, religious zeal, the desire to spread Christianity and find mythical Christian allies like Prester John, and the spirit of adventure and scientific curiosity. European navigators embarked on daring voyages into uncharted waters. The Portuguese, under the patronage of figures like Prince Henry the Navigator, systematically explored the western coast of Africa throughout the 15th century, eventually rounding the Cape of Good Hope. Vasco da Gama's successful voyage from Portugal around Africa to Calicut on the Malabar coast of India in 1497 to 1499 was a landmark achievement. It opened up a direct maritime route to the sources of spices, bypassing the traditional overland and Mediterranean intermediaries, and heralded the beginning of European colonial and commercial expansion in Asia. Shortly thereafter, the Spanish, seeking a westward route to Asia, sponsored Christopher Columbus's voyages, which led to the discovery of the Americas in 1492, inadvertently opening up vast new territories and resources for European exploitation. Ferdinand Magellan's expedition, 1519-1522, completed the first circumnavigation of the globe, further demonstrating the possibilities of long-distance sea travel. While these maritime developments were transforming global trade, overland routes did not disappear overnight. In Central Asia, the Timurid Empire, founded by Timur Tamerlane, r. 1370 to 1405, a charismatic and ruthless conqueror of Turco-Mongol descent who claimed lineage from Genghis Khan, briefly revived a semblance of imperial power and stability in Persia, Transoxiana, and surrounding regions in the late 14th and early 15th centuries. Timur made Samarkand his magnificent capital, adorning it with splendid mosques, madrasas, and mausoleums built by artisans forcibly brought from all corners of his vast empire. He and his successors, the Timurids, patronized art, science, and culture, leading to a Timurid renaissance in centers like Samarkand and Herat. While Timur's campaigns were often destructive, his empire did provide a degree of security for trade along certain routes, and he maintained diplomatic and commercial contacts with both Ming China and European powers. However, the Timurid Empire also fragmented after his death, and Central Asia once again experienced political instability. Certain segments of the Old Silk Road continued to be important for regional trade. For example, routes connecting Persia with India or Central Asian counties with Russia and China remained active. The Tea-Horse Road linking southwestern China, Yunnan, Sichuan, with Tibet, exchanging Chinese tea for Tibetan horses, continued to flourish. However, the grand transcontinental flow of high-value luxury goods that had characterized the Silk Road's golden ages increasingly favored the more efficient and capacious sea lanes controlled by European maritime powers. The economic and political center of gravity in global trade definitively shifted from the continental heartland of Eurasia to its oceanic peripheries. The age of the camel caravan as the primary carrier of intercontinental luxury trade was slowly but surely giving way to the age of the ocean-going sailing ship, the carrack, the galleon, and later the East Indiaman. The Silk Road, as a unified dominant system of east-west exchange, entered a long period of relative decline and transformation, though its echoes and legacies would prove remarkably enduring, even as the thundering hooves of Mongol cavalry faded into history and the billowing sails of European galleons came to dominate the horizons of global commerce. The legacy of the Silk Road, meticulously woven over more than 2 millennia, remained deeply embedded within the very fabric of the civilizations it had once so intimately connected. Its decline was not a sudden cataclysm, but a protracted metamorphosis, a gradual yielding of primacy to new routes and new powers. Yet the indelible marks it left on cultures, societies, economies, languages, arts, religions, and even the genetic makeup of peoples across the vast Eurasian landmass are undeniable and continue to resonate powerfully even in our modern world. The most profound and lasting legacies of the Silk Road lie not merely in the faded glory of abandoned oasis cities or the museum exhibits of traded artifacts, but in the less tangible, yet far more transformative, exchanges that shaped human thought and experience. The religions that traversed its paths, Buddhism, with its message of compassion and enlightenment, journeying from India to transform East Asia, Nestorian Christianity, carrying its unique theological interpretations to the heart of China, Manichaeism, with its stark dualism, finding followers from Persia to the Tarim Basin, and Islam, which spread both through conquest and peaceful conversion to become a dominant faith across much of the Silk Road's western and central sectors, all profoundly reshaped the spiritual and philosophical landscapes of entire continents. Their scriptures, rituals, ethical systems, and artistic expressions continue to inform the lives of billions today. Artistic motifs, architectural styles, musical traditions, and literary forms engaged in a vibrant, centuries-long dialogue along these routes. Consider the Hellenistic influence on Gandharan Buddhist sculpture, which in turn influenced the iconography of the Buddha across East Asia, or the adoption of Chinese landscape painting techniques and motifs like the dragon and phoenix into Persian miniature painting during the Ilkhanid period, or the westward journey of musical instruments like the lute, pipa in China, oud in the Middle East, eventually evolving into the European lute, carrying new melodies and musical theories with them. Architectural innovations from the Buddhist stupa and cave temple to the Islamic mosque with its minarets and domes and the Sasanian Iwan, vaulted hall, spread and were adapted in diverse cultural contexts. Literary themes, folk tales, and epic narratives also traveled, translated, and reinterpreted, enriching local literary traditions. The very cuisines of regions along the Silk Road bear witness. To this exchange, spices like pepper, cloves, and cinnamon from the East revolutionized Western cooking. Fruits like peaches, apricots, and citrus, originally from China or Southeast Asia, were disseminated westward, while grapes, pomegranates, and alfalfa traveled eastward to China, enriching diets and agricultural practices. Technological diffusion, though often a slow and complex process, had enormous long-term consequences that reverberated across the globe. Chinese inventions that are often considered the four great inventions, papermaking, printing, both woodblock and later movable type, gunpowder, and the magnetic compass, all made their way westward along the Silk Road, often with transformative impacts. Papermaking, once adopted in the Islamic world and then Europe, revolutionized record-keeping, scholarship, and communication. Printing, when developed with movable type in Europe by Gutenberg, building on earlier Asian innovations, played a crucial role in the Renaissance, the Reformation, and the spread of literacy. Gunpowder, adapted for military use, fundamentally altered warfare and the balance of power. The magnetic compass was indispensable for navigation, both overland and maritime, and was key to the European age of exploration. Conversely, knowledge and technologies from the West and the Islamic world also flowed eastward. Hellenistic and Indian astronomy and mathematics influenced Chinese scholarship. Islamic advances in medicine, e.g. the works of Avicenna and Al-Razi, optics, Ibn al-Haytham, chemistry, alchemy, and agricultural techniques, including the introduction of new crops and irrigation methods like qanats, also spread, enriching civilizations across Eurasia. The intricate system of celestial observation and calendrical science was a shared concern, with knowledge exchanged between Chinese, Indian, Persian, and Islamic astronomers. The genetic heritage of the populations living along the historical Silk Road routes is a living testament to centuries, even millennia, of migration, intermarriage, and interaction. Modern DNA studies reveal complex patterns of genetic admixture, showing how various groups, Indo-Europeans, Turkic peoples, Mongols, Han Chinese, Persians, Arabs, and many others, moved, settled, and blended over time, creating the diverse and multifaceted tapestry of peoples we see today across Central Asia, the Middle East, and beyond. The languages spoken along these routes, from Indo-European tongues like Persian, Sogdian, Khotanese, and Tocharian, now extinct, to Altaic languages, Turkic Mongolic, and Sino-Tibetan languages like Chinese and Tibetan, all interacted, borrowed vocabulary and grammatical structures from each other, and evolved in dynamic ways, reflecting the constant human traffic. Sogdian, as a commercial lingua franca for centuries, left its mark on many other languages. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, a new wave of Western interest in the Silk Road emerged, driven by a potent combination of factors: the burgeoning academic disciplines of archaeology, philology, and Oriental studies, the geopolitical rivalries of European colonial powers, particularly Britain and Russia, engaged in the Great Game for influence in Central Asia, and a romantic fascination with lost civilizations and exotic adventures. European explorers, archaeologists, geographers, linguists, and sometimes spies embarked on arduous and often dangerous expeditions into the remote and politically sensitive regions of Central Asia, particularly the Tarim Basin, then often referred to as Chinese, Turkestan or Eastern Turkestan. Figures like Sven Hedin of Sweden, a pioneering explorer and geographer who meticulously mapped vast uncharted areas, Sir Aurel Stein, a Hungarian-born British archaeologist who undertook several major expeditions and made spectacular discoveries, most famously at Dunhuang, Albert von Lecoq and Albert Grünwedel of Germany, who focused on sites like Turfan, Kocho, and Kucha, unearthing stunning Manichaean and Buddhist artworks, and Paul Pelliot of France, a brilliant sinologist and scholar who also acquired a significant collection of manuscripts from Dunhuang. These individuals became legendary for their daring journeys and the remarkable treasures they brought back to Western museums and libraries. They rediscovered ancient cities long buried by the shifting sands of the Taklamakan, such as Lulan, near Lop Nor, Miran, Nia, Endere, and Gaochang, Kocho. They meticulously excavated ruined fortresses, monasteries, stupas, and dwellings, unearthing stunning Buddhist murals, sculptures in stucco and wood, painted textiles, everyday objects, and most importantly, vast quantities of manuscripts. The chance discovery in 1900 by a Taoist monk named Wang Yuanlu of a sealed library cave, Cave 17, at the Mogao Grottos near Dunhuang proved to be one of the most significant archaeological finds of the 20th century. This hidden chamber contained an astonishing trove of an estimated 50,000 manuscripts, printed documents, paintings on silk and paper, and textiles, dating primarily from the 5th to the early 11th centuries. These documents, written in a multitude of languages and scripts, including Chinese, Tibetan, Sanskrit, Pali, Sogdian, Khotanese-Saka, Tocharian, Old Turkic Uyghur, Hebrew, and Tangut, covered an almost encyclopedic range of subjects: Buddhist sutras, Vinaya, and Abhidharma texts, many previously unknown or lost in their original languages, Taoist, Nestorian Christian, and Manichaean religious writings, official administrative records, legal documents, and census registers, private letters, business contracts, and loan agreements, literary works, poems, and historical accounts, medical treatises, astronomical charts, calendars, dictionaries, and even children's school exercises. Aurel Stein, Paul Pelliot, and later expeditions from Russia and Japan managed to acquire, through purchase or persuasion, under circumstances that are now viewed with considerable controversy, particularly in China, large portions of this invaluable treasure trove. These Dunhuang manuscripts, now dispersed in libraries and museums in London, Paris, Berlin, St. Petersburg, New Delhi, Beijing, and elsewhere, revolutionized our understanding of the history, cultures, religions, languages, and daily life of the Silk Road societies. Their study continues to yield new insights. The discovery of remarkably well-preserved mummies in the Tarim Basin, some dating back as far as 2000 BCE, with Caucasoid features and wearing elaborate woolen textiles, further fueled public fascination and scholarly debate about the early inhabitants of the region and the complex patterns of migration and interaction along the Eurasian steppe corridor. It was the German geographer Baron Ferdinand von Richthofen who, in a series of works published from 1827 onwards, based on his own travels in China, coined the evocative term Die Seidenstrasse, the Silk Road, or more accurately, Die Seidenstraßen, the Silk Roads plural, to describe these ancient networks of transcontinental exchange. His nephew, the archaeologist Ernst Herzfeld, further popularized the term. These late 19th and early 20th century expeditions and the scholarly work that followed brought the rich, complex, and often forgotten history of the Silk Road back into global consciousness and laid the foundations for what is now a vibrant and interdisciplinary academic field of Silk Road studies. The ethical considerations surrounding the removal of artifacts from their original contexts by these early explorers remain a sensitive and contentious issue, highlighting the complex legacy of colonial-era archaeology. Today, the concept of the Silk Road continues to resonate powerfully, not just among historians and archaeologists, but also in the popular imagination and even in contemporary geopolitics. It serves as a potent symbol of globalization avant la lettre, a historical precedent for our own deeply interconnected world. It reminds us that civilizations have rarely, if ever, developed in complete isolation, and that cross-cultural exchange, despite its inherent challenges, risks, and complexities, has been a fundamental and enduring engine of human progress, innovation, cultural enrichment, and mutual understanding, as well as misunderstanding and conflict. In recent decades, the term has been dramatically revived in a geopolitical and economic context, with initiatives like China's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, sometimes referred to as the New Silk Road. This vast global infrastructure development strategy, launched in 2013, aims to create new trade corridors, transportation networks, high-speed railways, highways, ports, energy pipelines, and telecommunications links, seeking to enhance connectivity and economic cooperation across Eurasia, Africa, Oceania, and even Latin America. While the motivations, aims, benefits, and potential pitfalls of these modern initiatives are subjects of ongoing international discussion, debate, and scrutiny, their deliberate invocation of the historical Silk Road underscores the enduring allure and perceived strategic importance of intercontinental connectivity and the powerful symbolism that these ancient routes continue to hold. As we draw this extensive exploration to a close, reflecting upon the immense chronological span and geographical breadth of the Silk Road's story, from the tentative missions of Zhang Qian seeking allies and heavenly horses, through the vibrant cosmopolitanism of Tang Chang'an and the bustling Sogdian Emporia, to the Mongol-forged Pax Mongolica that briefly unified Eurasia, and its eventual transformation. With the rise of maritime power, we are left with a profound appreciation for the sheer scale of human endeavor it represented. This is a narrative authored not by singular heroes, but by the cumulative efforts, aspirations, and often unrecorded lives of countless individuals. The anonymous merchant leading his laden camels through a blinding desert sandstorm, his eyes fixed on a distant, shimmering horizon. The devout monk, his back bent with fatigue, painstakingly copying a sacred scripture by the flickering light of an oil lamp in a remote cave monastery. the skilled artisan, her fingers deftly weaving intricate patterns into a bolt of shimmering silk that might one day adorn an empress in a far-off land, the curious diplomat carefully navigating the complex protocols and linguistic challenges of a foreign court, the humble farmer patiently tending his irrigated fields in an oasis, coaxing life from an arid land to sustain the passing caravans. It was a world of dazzling contrasts, of breathtaking beauty and abject squalor, of immense wealth concentrated in a few hands and grinding poverty for the many, of profound spiritual searching and brutal cynical political ambition, of moments of peaceful coexistence and periods of violent, devastating conflict, of insatiable intellectual curiosity, and deep-seated cultural prejudice. Yet, through all these vicissitudes across all these centuries, the threads of connection, though sometimes stretched thin by war, disease, or political upheaval, or temporarily severed by natural disasters, were never entirely broken. The faint echoes of those ancient caravans, the imagined scent of exotic spices and perfumes, lingering in the historical imagination, the shared cultural motifs that still adorn our buildings and art, and the complex genetic and linguistic heritage that continues to link peoples across vast geographical and cultural distances, all these serve as enduring reminders of the Silk Road's profound and lasting impact on the trajectory of human civilization. It is far more than just a romantic chapter in the history of commerce. It is a timeless and resonant metaphor for humanity's unceasing quest for knowledge, for connection, for prosperity, and for a deeper, more nuanced understanding of the diverse and wondrous world we collectively inhabit. And so, our exceptionally extended sojourn along the myriad intertwined pathways of the legendary Silk Road for this particular evening, gently and perhaps finally, comes to its conclusion. I hope that this deep and comprehensive immersion into the currents of ancient history, the ebb and flow of mighty empires, the intricate dance of cultures, and the enduring, indomitable spirit of human exchange has provided you with a tranquil, engaging, and perhaps even enlightening backdrop for your period of rest. Thank you most sincerely for your steadfast companionship on this long, winding, and detailed journey through the annals of time. May your night be filled with a profound and restorative peace, and may your dreams be as rich, varied, and filled with distant wonders as the many cultures that once flourished and interacted along these ancient and storied routes. Until we meet again for another exploration into the depths of the past, sleep deeply, sleep soundly, and sleep well.